guys, so welcome to my Boston vlog part 2. This was such a great trip, honestly, and obviously because I did split it into 2 parts, I didn't have an intro video for the second part. So I thought I'd do a quick one here. You'll be able to see the second half of my trip. If you haven't seen the first part, I will link it down below. The first part ended with my day kind of on the harbor. I did a harbor tour and then an aquarium tour, which you would have seen B-roll footage of already. So when I start in my next clip after you see this, that's what I'm going to be discussing is that day and then what I was planning to do the next day. So that's where we're kicking this part off. Thank you to everyone who watched the first part and all of your kind comments. It was really wonderful to hear different people's opinions about that area. It's just one of my favorite places in the world. So definitely a great trip, both the first half and the second half. So I'll let you check out my second half of my trip and hopefully it will be as entertaining as you found the first half if you watched it. Hey guys, so I am too lazy to set up my phone in some way that allows me to just sit and talk to it. So hopefully this part isn't too shaky and we'll see how long my arm holds out. But I am home. I did do a harbor tour today and ended up going to the aquarium. You would have seen obviously footage of that. I don't really have any haul today beyond a new water bottle because the one I brought with me, let me show you. The one I brought with me, I ended up dropping in the airport and I didn't realize in the moment, but it has a hole in the top of the cap and it's just small enough that it doesn't cause too much damage when it's been in my bag. Like it only spills a little bit, but it's enough that unfortunately this happened to my book, which I'm really upset about. But moving on, yes, so I decided I just needed a new water bottle, and at the aquarium, thank goodness they had some, so I have one. I am planning, this is still like mostly full from today, so I'm going to drink the rest of what's in here and then I'll throw this out. Anyway, I really wanted to come on here and let you know what I'm going to do tomorrow because I'm hoping tomorrow morning to get out as soon as possible. Not terribly early, but a little bit on the earlier side. Although, to be fair, I probably don't need to rush too much because my first like solid appointment for a tour isn't until noon. So I'll have some time, but I'm planning to go to Salem tomorrow. I have 2 tours scheduled there as well. The first is to Nathaniel Hawthorne's house, the house of the 7 Gables, so that will be great. We got a little bit more Hawthorne in for this trip. And then I have a tour of the Daniels house, which I think is one of the oldest houses that is there. I also have plans to go to several of the shops around there, wander, of course. I may go to some of the Salem witch trial museums. However, last time I went, if I remember correctly, a lot of them are kind of like wax museums and that's just not my thing. So I may like go to the local cemetery and stuff, but I'm probably not going to do much of the wax museums. But like I said, there's some stores I'd like to go to. I'm planning to get some souvenirs for some of my friends from there. And there is at least one bookstore and then a couple of other stores that were marked as bookstores, but I think are a little bit different than that. So I may go there as well. So yes, very excited about that. As far as reading goes, I did finish The Inheritance last night and did enjoy it. It's not like a mind-blowing story, but reading the note in the back actually was very helpful because I guess it's a book that actually was technically Louisa May Alcott's first novel that she ever wrote when she was 17, and it was never actually published in her lifetime. In fact, it wasn't published until very recently. That edition I have was the first time it's ever been published. However, obviously Louisa May Alcott kept the manuscript throughout her life and then handed it down through the generations. So kind of a special little experience, I'm sure, for her, and it was cool for me to be able to read it and say that I read her first novel. Definitely not one I would suggest for everyone unless you really like Louisa May Alcott and or Little Women. I think the curiosity of it is really neat, but it's a pretty standard story. The characters aren't very memorable or interesting in any way at all. It's very much a classic plot-driven novel where I just feel like classics, when they are plot-driven, tend to suffer a lot with character development. So that is definitely the case there. But like I said, I'm glad I read it. It was enjoyable enough that it wasn't like a chore to read. I ended up giving it 3 stars on Goodreads and 2.75 stars on Storygraph because it was pretty middle of the road, maybe like slightly below average. But I mean, it was a very average book. So anyway, it's only like 5 o'clock. I already had a little dinner because I was starving to death after the aquarium. I even wanted to stay at the aquarium longer, but I was just so hungry I could not stay in there. I just needed to go eat something. And I just don't really have anything else I super want to do today around Boston, so I've decided to just come in. I was planning to have today be a little bit more of a chill day anyway, so the fact that I was only out for kind of, I guess, like 6 hours, so it was still a while, but only like 6 hours of the day is fine. I'm going to read some of Once Upon a River, which I've read a couple chapters this morning and enjoyed it a lot. Love getting back into it. It's one of those stories that jumps around perspectives a lot, and so especially in the first several chapters, you're jumping into so many different perspectives and different people's views that it's hard to get really attached to any of them. So I'm curious to see how it goes the rest of the time, if it's going to be like that the whole time, or if it's going to end up gripping me a little bit more. I'm really upset about how destroyed this book is getting from being in my backpack. I should have expected it, but like, look on the corner right there, and then yeah, that mess right there, those are the biggest things. But anyway, yes, I'm probably going to read that for a while, and then I'll probably watch something a little later, maybe get to bed a little bit earlier if I feel so inclined. The thing is, I don't know if I'll be able to fall asleep earlier or not. But anyway, that is it for now, and I will update you probably after Salem tomorrow. It is now Sunday morning. I'm sorry I didn't come in last night to talk more about my trip to Salem, but ultimately it was really great. I went to the Daniels house. That was probably the highlight of my trip. It's one of the oldest houses still standing in Salem. It was built in the 1600s, and it's actually not held by any preservation group. It's really just owned by the family, and then I think there's a small company or something that works with the family to do these tours. The family still lives in the house, so we only got to see 3 of the rooms, which were part of the original house. The rest of the house, it sounds like, was built in the 1750s, so still pretty early, but that small portion was specifically built in the 1600s. But because it's not run by a preservation group, we were allowed to touch things, we were allowed to interact with the room, we could sit on some of the chairs and stuff. It was really, really cool and immersive. And in fact, a lot of the items are original to the house because the family kept a lot of the items that had always been there, which is just so neat. There were some things that had been brought in because an antiques company had owned it, I think in the early 19th century, sometime in the, no, I think it was early 20th century. An antiques group ended up taking it on, and they brought some things in that weren't originally there, and they're not really sure what exactly was original and what exactly wasn't, but most of it, they said, was original, and there were pieces that they for sure knew were original to the home. It was just really cool. The best part was they took us into the room where the family would have hung out, and it was the one part of the house that didn't really get any changes made to it since the 1600s because it wasn't meant for the public eye, so it was just the family in there. It was kind of like their kitchen / just hangout space, and so the architecture of that space really hasn't changed much beyond where it was in the 1600s. So it was really cool because then he talked about the Salem witch trials, and even though the Daniels family, we don't know apparently what role they would have played in the trials, we are certain that they were around during that time, so they would have been experiencing all the confusion and stress. They don't believe that they were Puritans because they have like anti-evil symbols carved into the parts of their home, and that wasn't really a Puritan thing to do things like that. It was a little more in the pagan realm, and so they believe that the Daniels might have been like Anglican or something, but they still were surrounded by that. In fact, some of their neighbors were tried for witchcraft. I think one of their neighbors was actually one of the judges. So anyway, super cool, very immersive. Highly recommend if you go to Salem to go to Daniel's house. It's not a very long tour by any means, but it was really incredible and, like I said, very immersive. I did, of course, also go to the houses of 7 Gables. Unfortunately, that was a little less exciting. It's a beautiful space. There's multiple houses that have been brought there. The grounds are beautiful. It's right on the ocean because the original owners of the house were ship people. I don't remember the exact term, but they were people who owned a shipping company, and so they had their house right by where their ships would come in so that they would bring them right into the house and into their warehouses. So super interesting there. But it was mostly focused on the House of the 7 Gables, the book, and so a lot of the things they've changed in this house, added to this house, have been inspired by the book as opposed to the history of it, which is still cool, but I'm not that attached to that book. I have read it, and I actually want to read it again because one thing from this trip that has developed within me is an affection for Nathaniel Hawthorne. We've learned a little bit about him in Concord and in Salem, and I just have really come to like him. In the past, I read The Scarlet Letter, obviously, in high school. I honestly did not remember anything about it. I think I've mentioned that in this vlog. But I remember liking it. I didn't remember any passionate feelings towards it. And then I read The House of the 7 Gables a couple years ago and was disappointed with it. So I just have kind of been on the fence with Nathaniel Hawthorne. I'm like, oh, that's cool. But the more I've learned about him, the more I've liked him. I've also been listening to the audiobook for The Scarlet Letter, and I love his writing. I knew this when I read The House of the 7 Gables, that I loved his writing. His plot was just not quite there for me. But I do want to revisit The House of the 7 Gables as well, because I think now I'm starting to understand that he wrote very gothically and very psychological plots. So I think his writing's beautiful, but I think his plots, there's not a lot necessarily exciting happening because most of it is psychological. And so you really get the exciting parts within those long-winded, wordy portions that maybe I tend to tune out a little bit more, but that's when the exciting things are actually happening. And so listening to The Scarlet Letter, I've learned that a little bit more, and so I've come to appreciate it a little bit more. In fact, I actually want to reread The Scarlet Letter again soon and physically read it, because I feel like there's a lot I've missed because I'm listening to it on audiobook, and there's moments where I'm walking around, I'm thinking about other things as I'm passing them or safely crossing the road. I'm trying to make sure that I do that. So there's definitely been a lot that I've missed listening to it on audiobook, so I'd love to physically reread it as well, because I am actually really loving it in a surprising way. So anyway, that was a tangent, but yes, The House of the Seven Gables, it was mostly focused on the novel and a little less on the history. It talked about the history, but I just never felt any real attachment to the people that lived there. There wasn't any really personal stories that were told, which I think is the most fun about house tours, is hearing personal stories about the people that lived there, personal experiences, and making them really relevant to that moment in which you're standing in those same rooms. And they just didn't really do that. It was just more kind of talking about why they made certain changes to the house because of the book. They talked generally about the people that lived there. The only really personal moment had to do with Nathaniel Hawthorne talking about how his cousin actually had lived in this house, and she was the one that told him about what the house used to look like with the seven gables and some of the history of the family. And so she talked a little bit about, like, in this room, this is where they would have had those conversations. And so there was a little bit of that, but on the whole, there just wasn't a lot of very personal feeling in what they were saying about this house. It was mostly just stuff about the house itself, which is interesting but just isn't my favorite, or about the different items and what they would have been used for within the time period, which is, again, is interesting, but I'm there for a specific set of people. So anyway, it wasn't a waste of time. I'm glad I went. I would for sure go back again and see how the tour changes and just, bring someone else. I know there's a certain room that they were in the process of redoing when we visited it, so I'd love to see how that turns out. There was a grounds tour that was just like an audio tour that I heard part of, but it was really cold and I was hungry and really tired. It was the end of my day there, and so I was like, I'm just gonna leave. I'm not gonna stay for the audio tour, but I'd love to go back and experience that a little bit more. So I'd definitely go back, and it wasn't a waste of time, but I was just slightly disappointed because I expected a little bit more from it, especially after visiting the old manse in Concord where I learned about Nathaniel Hawthorne. I was just really excited to get even more in depth with him, and I just don't feel like we got that opportunity. So anyway, that is it for Salem. Besides, actually, I do want to give you a little book haul from Salem. So a couple of things. First of all, you would have seen some of my footage from the bookstores. The first bookstore I went to was the one that was marked solidly. It was books. That was all it was. And so that was the one I had the most hope for. But when I went in, unfortunately, they didn't have anything I wanted, really. They had a couple of possibilities of things I've thought about, but nothing I was like super excited to get in the moment. And they didn't even have really any cards or anything that spoke to me, so I just ended up not getting anything there, which I was sad about because I really have been wanting to support the independent bookstores I go to, but I didn't want to get junk that I was just going to throw away either or use. So unfortunately, I didn't get anything there. I then went to another bookstore, but it was a little bit more of a new age, like they had stones and other kind of things like that. Sort of things you would kind of put in the witchy area, but not super dark. It was kind of the lighter witchy area, I guess, which was cool and interesting. Not really my thing, but I did get some souvenirs there for my friends. I think tomorrow night I'll show you all the souvenirs I got for other people because you may be curious. But anyway, yes, I got some things for a group of my friends from college, and then so I did get something there, and then I left, and then there was, after the Daniels house, I went to another bookstore that I wasn't sure about, but it was actually kind of a fandom-y store. Like, it was really cool. They had a good amount of books, but it was mostly like they had a Jane Austen / Victorian era section where they had a bunch of Pride and Prejudice stuff, and then a bunch of books that were like Victorian writers and books about the Victorian era and things like that. Really, really cool. You would have seen footage from it. They had another section that was like Sherlock Holmes, so they had a bunch of Sherlock books, and then they had fandom kind of things from the show Sherlock, but also just Sherlock Holmes in general. They had a Louisa May Alcott section. They had a writers section. They had kind of a local lore section, so like a lot of the witches and Nathaniel Hawthorne and stuff, and so that was really cool. Anyway, I loved the store a lot, and I was actually tempted. There's a book by Louisa May Alcott that they had that also was at Orchard House that I didn't get, called Fairy Fables. I think it was one of her earliest published fiction works, and the edition they had was so cute, and I still really want it, but I'm like, I just don't know when I'm going to read it, and so I decided not to get it. I would have, but I did find something else else that I was really excited about, and that is 6 Women of Salem, The Untold Story of the Accused and Their Accusers in the Salem Witch Trials by Marilynne K. Roach. The girl at the front desk actually said that this woman was the person that they go to whenever they find something new in the town. So she's definitely a really good resource when it comes to learning about Salem and its history, especially the witch trials. And she said this one in particular was really, really good. So I'm excited to have it. I don't know when I'll read it, possibly in July, but we'll get to that in a little bit, in a couple months when I get closer to July, of what my plans are there. But yes, I did get this nonfiction work about the Salem witch trials. And then of course I got some things from Nathaniel Hawthorne's house and the House of the Seven Gables. So I got basically nicer copies of the books I've already read by him. So I got the Scarlet Letter because the copy I have of both this and the House of the Seven Gables are like old mass market paperback editions, which I just got because I was like, I'm not that attached to them, but I would like to have a copy. But now I'm getting more attached to Nathaniel Hawthorne after this experience. So I decided to get prettier copies of them with notes. I was going to get like the Blithesdale romance, which is another book by him. I already have the Marble Fawn, so the only ones I don't have by him that are his full novels are Fan Charts, which is a lesser known first work by him, and then the Blithesdale romance. But the Blithesdale romance, the copy they had was so ugly, I just could not bring myself to get that edition. And they didn't have any others, so I just ended up going for these. I really like this one a lot. Mostly I went for this one. There was another one that I liked the cover a little bit more, but this one actually had notes, whereas the other one did not. So I decided to go for that. And then similar thing with this, the House of the Seven Gables, there were other editions that, well, first of all, the prettier editions were actually a lot more expensive in this one especially. And even though I've developed more of an affection for Nathaniel Hawthorne and for these books and a desire to reread them, I don't think I love them enough to get an expensive edition of them. I wanted something cheaper, but that still had notes. So this is what I went for. And the cool thing about these two is they do have a little stamp that says purchased at the House of the Seven Gables. So you're able to see that it also has a copy of Nathaniel Hawthorne's signature there, so that's really, really cool. Yeah, super, super glad I ended up deciding to pick up both of these. I originally was just gonna get a nicer copy of the Scarlet Letter, but while being in there, I was like, you know what, I may as well do the House of the Seven Gables as well, so I at least have kind of matching nicer copies of his works that I own. So yes, that is it as far as that goes. Today, I'm planning to go to church this morning. Usually the church I attend, their church services are 2 hours. I'm only going to go for the first hour because that's when kind of the most important part happens. The rest is just more learning, which I love, but for the sake of being here by myself and stuff, I'm just gonna go to the first hour. And then afterwards, I'm planning to just walk around Harvard Square, Harvard campus, just see what I see. There is a used bookstore out there that I plan to go to, and there's also a new bookstore that's like the other edition of the bookstore that I went to back a few days ago, my first day here. I mentioned it, called Porter Square Books. There's the original is in the Harvard area. It's a little bit further away though, so I have to see how far the walk is before I officially decide, but I may go there. It also depends on what's in the used bookstore that I'm going to, what luck I have there. Really, I was really hoping to get the marriage portrait at the one bookstore in Salem that I didn't get anything at, and they didn't have it. So I've kind of been like, oh, maybe I'll go to Porter Square Books so I can try to get that there. But then I'm also like, do I really need it right now? Probably not. I'm probably not going to read it for a while. But I really want to get it because it sounds interesting, first of all. It's about Lucrezia de Medici, who is believed to have been murdered by her husband, and so it's just her story basically from her perspective, which first of all just sounds interesting, but also it's kind of my last chance for Maggie O'Farrell. So I've read Hamnet and I enjoyed it, but I expected more from it. Like, I was kind of disappointed because even though I gave it like a 4 stars, I expected it to be 5 stars. Everybody loved it, and it just didn't quite hit me that same way. And then I read The Vanishing Act of Esme Lennox, which I really enjoyed most of the way through, but the ending I liked, but I don't know, there were some things I didn't love about it. And so I feel like Maggie O'Farrell is quickly turning into an author that I enjoy but I don't love, and I kind of just don't want to keep wasting my time with her stuff. The hard thing is she's one of those people who writes books that with premises that sound amazing and then they just slightly disappoint me. And so yeah, I just am a little unsure, doing that, but Marriage Portrait I think is going to be my final opportunity for her to wow me. I've heard a few people say that there was something a little bit different about Marriage Portrait that just felt different about her approach and stuff, and so I'm hoping that difference will be what will bring me in, but we shall see. I am not sure. It's also on the Women's Prize for Fiction shortlist actually at this point, and it's one that I really want to get to from that list. The other one is Demon Copperhead because I've heard so many good things about it. I also have considered doing Fire Rush, but the time period has me a little bit worried that some of the content is not really gonna be my favorite language-wise and stuff, so I don't know about that one. But anyway, I'm rambling now. Yes, today's a Harvard day. I'm gonna walk around. I don't know how long I'll be out. My church service is at 11:30, so it will be kind of the afternoon that I'll be spending in Harvard area. And like I said, I really don't know what to expect today. It's just gonna kind of be hanging out. It looks like it might rain again. It's already rained a bit today, so I may even stay out for even less time because I don't want to be walking in the rain. I do have an umbrella, so that helps, and my red jacket that you see in a lot of my clips and pictures if you've followed me on Instagram is a rain jacket, so that helps. But we'll just kind of see how I feel. If I end up coming back here early, I'll probably just end up getting something to eat around here for dinner and just kind of watch some John Adams, read. It might be a pretty, I mean, I've already had some casual days, but it might be like in particular, like I'm only out for a few hours and then I'm back here again. So we'll see what happens. Anyway, this clip is already 20 minutes, so I'm going to stop it here and I will update you with my next little haul either this evening or tomorrow morning. Alright guys, so I just got back from my kind of wandering around Cambridge. Didn't get quite as much footage today, I think, mostly just because I just didn't have as much going on. I was mostly just wandering a lot. Sorry, the lighting in this clip is not going to be very pretty because it is raining outside and very dark even though it's 5 o'clock, so I'm not able to get a very good light from outside, so I've turned on the lamp that's in here. Also forgive any craziness with my hair, I mean as usual because it always just tends to get kind of messy, but especially today with all the rain it's gotten a little bit, especially underneath. I get curls underneath, so you'll see a little bit of that. But anyway, I mostly wanted to come on here briefly to give you another little book haul from today. So I did end up going to 2 bookstores and I got 2 books, one at each of them. So the first one was a used bookstore, and while there I ended up getting The Blithesdale Romance by Nathaniel Hawthorne. I mentioned that this was one that I really wanted to get, at least I think I did mention it, or maybe I just thought about it. Anyway, I did really want to get this, but the copy at House of the Seven Gables was really ugly, so I still don't love this cover, but I think it's better than the other one. Here's the thing, the other one I liked in some ways, but there were other ways that I really did not like it. It was very gothic cover with a woman's face and like a sheer sheet over it, which, like I said, I kind of liked, but I just didn't quite like how they did it, the execution of it. So this is a little bit less of an eyesore, basically, was what I was going for with this. Don't know anything about this book, but like I said, I am very interested in Nathaniel Hawthorne all of a sudden. I'm pretty sure he was not an abolitionist, so I think he was pro-slavery. Unfortunately, it could have been someone else, though, that I learned about in Concord that was not an abolitionist, but I'm pretty sure it was Hawthorne. Again, not 100% sure. But if that's true, obviously not a fan of that. But his writing and just some other aspects about him I'm very curious about. So yes, I got that. And then I went to a new bookstore, and I ended up, of course, picking up The Marriage Portrait by Maggie O'Farrell. I mentioned that this was the one I wanted to get if I went to a new bookstore. As usual, I prefer the UK edition of this book, but I also don't hate this US edition. At least I don't hate it as much as I hated the Hamnet US edition. I really hated that cover. So this one, I mean, it's a similar feel to that one, but I feel like the way they did it on this one is a little more bearable. So anyway, I'm excited to read this whenever I do. Hopefully it will redeem Maggie O'Farrell for me. That's pretty much it. I think I may do a clip tomorrow morning, but I may not. You know what? I'm just gonna say I'm not to and just do this clip here because this vlog's already going to be really long if it's not already divided into 2 parts. So tonight I'm going to watch more John Adams and read for the rest of the night. I'm not very hungry. I had a bit of a late lunch and it was a pretty big lunch. So you'll see over there, that little smiley face bag has a little something I can eat for dinner. I was like, what can I get that will save for a little while, because I will not want to leave my hotel room once I enter it. And I was right. I really don't want to go out there. So I ended up picking up a bagel and a bowl of fruit. And then when I get hungry in probably the next hour or 2, I will be able to eat that. Anyway, that's my evening, another evening of being chilled. I've loved this vacation for that reason, because while I love traveling with my family a lot and I would not want to only travel alone, my dad really is a goer, and so it's hard to get him to kind of settle in for an evening like this, especially not every single evening. If we go on a trip, we're going to be out at least till 7 every single day. If not later, we may get some opportunity to do a pool trip if there's a pool or something like that. But on the whole, that's just not something that would happen with my family. And so, plus, I mean, if I'm with my whole family, like, it's hard to get a moment alone anyway. So that's one pro of traveling alone, is I have complete control over when I go in, when I'm done for the day, when I get started in the morning. Like, I just can control every aspect of that. The other thing is, it's great part of being able to rent a car as well, is I also have control over that. Granted, there's some other stresses that go along with renting a car, but we're not going to get into that here. I already have dealt with some things, nothing major for sure. I haven't had to like take it into a shop or anything, but I had to fill up one of the tires, which was stressful just because I was like, oh no, like, is there a leak or something? That was yesterday and I haven't seen anything today about it, so I'm assuming it's fine. Anyway, tomorrow I'm going to be going to Quincy, which I'm so excited. This is probably the thing I've been most excited to do, is go to Quincy. Unfortunately, the John Adams birthplace and Peacefield, his later house that eventually John Quincy Adams lived in, those are closed right now as far as I could tell, so I will really only be able to go to the visitor center. I will be able to see the outside, and I believe Abigail Adams' birthplace is there. I don't know if they'll be doing tours, but possibly. And there is a church where John Adams is buried. I might go to that too, do that tour. I'm also getting a little tired of doing tours. I'm not gonna lie. Like, I enjoy them, and maybe I'd like to do at least one of them, but I may just take a picture of the church where John Adams is buried. I don't know. We'll see what strikes my mood. I also don't want to like waste tomorrow since it's my last day. So I do want it to do something, but what that something is up for debate. So there's that. I for sure will be getting a couple of books at the visitor center, but those will be my last. I'm planning to get John Adams by David McCullough. Hopefully they have it and they're not out. I've seen it at so many bookstores. Well, I've almost every bookstore has had it, even the used bookstores, but I keep not getting it because I'm like, I want to get it in Quincy. That's where I want to get this book. They have to have it. That's where I'm gonna get it. Watch them be out and me not be able to get it still. Ugh, I hope not. If that's the case, I'll probably come back here and then walk to one of the nearby bookstores and see if they have it so I can just get it. But yes, I want to get that. I have already read it, but I listened to the audiobook of it and I really would like to have a physical copy. And then I'm probably going to get another book about the Adamses that I have not read while I'm there. I would love to get a collection of Abigail and John's letters to each other if that exists, or possibly a book just about Abigail. I'm not sure. I'm just gonna kind of wander around and see what they've got there. I'm going to end this now. The next clips will probably be a final montage of my experiences in Quincy, and then I can't decide if I'm just gonna wrap it up with Quincy and just be like, well, tomorrow I'm going back home. This is great. But I also, in case there's something interesting I want to talk about regarding my flights, I hope there's nothing too bad interesting, but in case there's something I want to say about it, I might close out the vlog there. We'll see what ends up happening, but for now this clip is over. See you in the next one. Alright, so I am back from Quincy and it was definitely a wonderful experience, just very peaceful, super nice. I ended up actually getting 3 books while I was at the Visitors Center for the Adams National Park. So I thought I would haul them really quick, and then I was also going to show you what I got souvenirs-wise for my friends and family, because I had mentioned, I think in the last clip that I talked to you guys in, that I wanted to do that. Maybe I didn't and just thought it, but I'm going to do that. So of course, like I said, I did get John Adams by David McCullough, my own physical copy. I listened to the audiobook of this beginning of last year, I believe, and really loved it, and I just wanted to have my own copy so one day I can read it physically and maybe take notes and stuff as I go along. Then I did get a copy of the letters of John and Abigail Adams. I don't know that this necessarily holds contains all of them. I doubt it because I'm pretty sure there were a lot more than this. I could be wrong about that though. But yes, these are letters that they sent back and forth to each other while they were apart for a good amount of time within their lives. They also had a collection of letters between Thomas Jefferson, Abigail, and John that I was tempted by, but it was a little more expensive, first of all, and second of all, I love Abigail and John and their relationship, and so I felt like I had to do this one if I had the choice between the two of them. And then I decided to get another nonfiction that wasn't letters and wasn't something that I have already read, and I ended up going with Founding Mothers, The Women Who Raised Our Nation by Cokie Roberts. This is just like what it sounds like. It talks about women, particularly during the American Revolution, who were involved in some way. So it discusses, of course, Abigail Adams, Mercy Otis Warren, Deborah Reed Franklin, Eliza Pinckney, Martha Washington, and many others. So yeah, I thought it would just be nice to have a book like this. The other one that I was tempted by, I can't even remember what it was called, but it was basically about the Adams, the Quincy's, and the Hancocks and how those families impacted the revolution. There is an audiobook of that available on Audible, so I probably will try to get that at some point. But yes, those are the final books I got from this trip, and we will see how my packing goes and how heavy my suitcase is. Then, like I said, I wanted to show you the souvenirs I got for my family. So my dad is also a big fan of John Adams, so I ended up getting him this leather bookmark that has a quote by John Adams on it. It says, "Let us dare to read, think, speak, and write," right there. So I thought that was a really pretty little gift. I was trying to keep all of the different souvenirs I got to a smaller amount so that everybody had a kind of even amount spent on them. So then for two of my brothers, I ended up getting these playing cards. One of them actually collects playing cards. That's kind of his souvenir of choice when we go places. The other one collects mugs, and I just didn't feel like I would have the space to safely pack that in my suitcase or my backpack. So I decided to go with playing cards because he also just moved into his own place, or he has lived by himself before, but he did just move out again, and he probably would like some items to keep him entertained. So I decided to go with that for now. I actually don't even know when I'm going to see him because he actually moved a few hours away from us, so it may be a while before he even gets his souvenir, but I at least got him something. Then for my mother and sister, I ended up getting, they had these keychains at Louisa May Alcott's house. My souvenir of choice usually is a keychain as well. I collect them, so I did get one for myself as well. One is a book of Little Women, and then the other is a quote by Louisa May Alcott that says, "Love is a great beautifier." So I don't know if you can see that very well through the plastic, but yes, I got those. And for my youngest brother who collects magnets when we go places, I got this Entering Fenway Park magnet that I think he'll appreciate. He's into sports, and honestly the one who collects playing cards is too, but that was the easiest playing cards to find for me. But I got this little magnet for my other brother. Then I have a couple of friends. We were roommates in college, the four of us. I believe they've been in vlogs and stuff before, so you would have seen them if you've seen most of my videos on my channel. But we used to make jokes about how one day when we were old and still single, that we would all live in a hut in the woods together and be known as like the witches of wherever we settle. So I ended up feeling like I needed to get them something in Salem. So I got these little, I think they were called totem stones. So they each have a different animal on it. This one's like a unicorn. No, it's like a Pegasus, I guess. I have like an eagle on the green, and then a dove with an olive branch, and a turtle. I mostly wanted to get different colors, so I kind of just chose animals that were cool within those various colors. So one of them will be mine, but I'm going to let them, next time I hang out with them, which hopefully will be pretty soon, because one of them that's attending law school in Idaho is coming home, so it's about time that we hang out again. So I'll be able to give that to them at that point. And the final little souvenir I have is for my friend Cariana, who's the one who goes to Shakespeare Festival with me. She's also the one I'm starting my business project with that I've mentioned on my channel before. So because she's just one person, I felt it's kind of funny because I group, my family together and I group my college roommates together. together. And so for each of the individuals within those groups, I wanted to get something cheaper so that as a whole it added up to a certain amount. But Kariana, my other friend, is kind of separate, so I ended up deciding to get her something a little bit bigger. It made sense in my head. Plus, she's also very interested in history and literature. In fact, she's getting a bachelor's degree in both English literature and in history, so I figured she'd extra appreciate stuff from here, and I ended up getting her this Join or Die shirt. She likes the dark colors, so hopefully she'll enjoy that. And that is everything as far as what I've purchased today and throughout my trip for friends and family. I realize I haven't really talked much about what I've been reading, so let's go a little bit into that. First of all, I've listened to almost all of the Scarlet Letter. I'll probably finish it tonight. Contrary to my usual habits while I've been here of as soon as I get into my hotel room, I do not go back out. I actually feel like I can today. Plus, I came in here kind of early, like it was just too early for dinner, and I didn't want just another bagel and fruit, so I'm going to end up going to get dinner, and probably as soon as I finish this clip, most likely. And on the way there and back, I will be listening to the rest of the Scarlet Letter, finishing that off. I'm honestly really surprised by how much I've liked this. I think I've mentioned in other clips that my appreciation for Nathaniel Hawthorne has grown on this trip, and listening to the Scarlet Letter, I just love his writing style so much. This was something, I feel like the one thing about The House of the Seven Gables that I liked when I read it was really Nathaniel Hawthorne's writing. Everything else was just fine, but the highlight of that experience was his writing style. And so listening to the Scarlet Letter, like hearing his words out loud, he's just a master with words. And so I've really enjoyed that. I feel like it's a story that I could see people, especially on a first time through, I don't know about other people, but I tend to just mostly focus on the plot, so I'm not really as much enjoying some of the other aspects of the story because I'm just trying to figure out what's going on. And so I feel like if it's your first time reading and you're kind of more like that, there's not a ton of physical plot going on. We get some, but a lot of it is psychological and relationship based and spiritual, honestly. A lot of the growth and change within the characters is psychological and spiritual. There's a lot of symbolism, there's a lot of gothic elements that aren't necessarily jump scares or anything like that, but they are very just entwined with the story in a way that creates a very eerie and sad feeling, which is just beautifully done. But yes, I definitely think if you haven't read The Scarlet Letter and you want to try it, go into it knowing Nathaniel Hawthorne's writing is kind of dense in some ways, but it's beautiful. There's not a lot of physical plot going on, so a lot of it is going to be psychological for the characters, so analyzing that is going to keep you much more engaged in the story. Thankfully, it's not a very long book anyway, so it's not like you're forced to deal with it for a very long time, but be aware of that going in. And I think honestly it helps to have a little bit of background understanding of, first of all, the puritanical / just deep religious beliefs of that time period, and also some of the superstitions that were common of that time, particularly regarding Satan and witches, because I think that makes things, the symbolism behind things, a lot more clear. It's not like it's so out there that you wouldn't be able to just infer what some of the symbolism is, but it is kind of helpful, I think, having a little bit of background knowledge. Again, not a ton. You don't need to like buy a whole book about it or anything, but knowing something about like that era of time, I think it's like early 1700s is when it's set. I'm not 100% sure. But yes, it's going great. And I only have like 30 minutes left of the audiobook. So like I said, I should finish it tonight. As for Once Upon a River, I have been slow with this. I don't fully know why. I'm enjoying it. But like I just mentioned, when I first read a book, I am a lot more focused on what the heck's going on. And so when a book is slow, the way Once Upon a River is, sometimes it works for me, depending on how they do it. But sometimes it can end up making it hard for me to read the book for a very long period of time because it just feels like it takes forever to get any deeper into the actual story, especially because there are multiple perspectives. It's all third person, but we're jumping jumping around into different people's stories, which is fun, and there's a charm about that, but it also makes the action of the plot feel even slower because we're just getting snapshots of all these different stories that are connected but aren't necessarily super intertwined, at least not yet. And so it feels like it takes forever to read, even like 10 pages. It feels like it takes forever, and so I'm not even quite halfway through it. I really wanted to finish it on this trip, but I just, haven't been able to focus on it long enough to really make a dent. I'm hoping I'll be able to finish it by this weekend. That won't be part of this vlog, but that is my goal. That way I'll have finished a book for May, and then I'll probably start Assassin's Quest. I do need to start, once I finish the Scarlet Letter, I'm going to listen to The Trumpet Major by Thomas Hardy, if I can find a good audiobook for it. I haven't looked yet. But that is my Hardy novel pick for Misery May that I am participating in. So I wanted to get into that, and Assassin's Quest is also for Misery May. So that is the reading update, and I don't think I'm going to finish this vlog yet because I want to give myself the chance tomorrow to wrap it up a little bit more formally, and having known exactly how the rest of my trip went, any last minute updates or things that I wanted to share with you. And if there's nothing, I'll just kind of say goodbye in my next clip probably, but I wanted to give an opportunity to myself to speak more if I have more to say after my flights tomorrow. So anyway, I will see you in my next clip. Hey guys, so my trip is officially over. I'm obviously back home. Apologies for not being put together. I was too tired and lazy to do full-on makeup and stuff today, which I think is understandable. I ended up getting home at about midnight last night for Utah time, which means to me it was about 2 o'clock in the morning, so I was pretty tired. Originally, I was supposed to be home a few hours earlier. However, on my first flight from Boston to Dallas, it ended up being delayed like almost an hour and a half, and by that point I was definitely going to miss my second flight. Originally that flight was supposed to leave at 2:15 and it ended up changing all the way to 3:30, and like I said, I knew I was going to miss my next flight. So I looked up some other options and ended up finding one that would have me fly from Boston to Phoenix and then from Phoenix home. However, because I had had so many delays already, I was a little bit worried. I had about almost 2 hours worth of time. I guess it was like an hour and 20 minutes originally for my layover. So I knew if I had another big delay, then I was probably going to miss my next flight. And that was going to be the last flight to Salt Lake City from Phoenix that day. So I would have had to spend the night in the airport and then go early the next morning, which I was prepared to deal with if I had to, but I obviously really did not want to. But thankfully, after the change, I ended up hanging out in the airport for like 4 to 5 hours, but we left about 4 o'clock Boston time and then did make it about 25 minutes early to Phoenix, which was really nice. My gate for my second flight wasn't terribly far, a bit of a walk, but not terribly. We did end up switching gates twice. So originally we were at B6, then we moved to B4, and then finally we ended up at gate A11, which was pretty close to where I had landed. So I was a little bit annoyed that I had made a little bit more of a journey to get to the B gates from the A gates, and then I ended up having to go back again. But like I said, I ended up having like almost 2 hours worth of layover time, so it really wasn't that big of a deal. And arrived home at about 11 o'clock, and then it took a little bit of time to get my bag and then drive home, obviously. So yeah, by the time I was like laying down to go to sleep, it was about midnight. So yes, a little bit crazy, but not nearly as stressful as the first time around as my trip from Salt Lake out to Boston was. Thank heavens. I did, though, because I had so many hours to do so. I ended up finishing Once Upon a River. I actually finished this with like an hour to spare on my first flight, so I honestly didn't really know what to do with myself the rest of the time. I did have a couple of the books, so they ended up checking my bag because they were worried it was going to be a little bit too big. I've used the bag before, so it just obviously is up to whoever's letting you on board. So I didn't have the books in there, but I did have a couple of books in my backpack. But because of Misery May, I knew exactly what I was wanting to read next, and it wasn't either of the books that were in my bag, so I didn't want to start either of them knowing I wasn't going to be able to finish them. So I really was struggling to find things to do with myself. I just kind of sat and thought for a lot of time, and then on my second flight, it was only an hour and a half, so not very long, and I had a guy sitting next to me who was a little more talkative, so we were able to chat most of the flight, and it ended up being a good time ultimately. But I was a little bit sad that I had like basically 3.5 hours left of travel time between the layover and my flight that I could have been reading even even more, but I just didn't have anything to read. But anyway, thought I'd give my final thoughts on this before closing out this vlog. Like I said, I did finish it on the plane, and I'm still figuring out my feelings towards this book. I think it's beautifully written. Diane Setterfield is such a wonderful author when it comes to her writing style, and I feel like this book will have a lot of staying power. It has a lot of discussion of the river being sort of this barrier between this life and the next. Really, overall, there's just a really big theme of moving from one side of the river to the other in various ways. Life to death, like I said, but also just this stage of life to the next stage, this person to a new person, grief to healing, childhood to adulthood, one generation to the next. Like, that's a constant theme throughout this, is that transition between different stages of life. But it doesn't really specifically say that. The only thing it specifically says that about is life and death. But really, you can see that theme in so many other aspects as well, and I thought it was just beautifully done. I think I would still say I like the 13th Tale better than this. It's been a while since I read the 13th Tale though, so I do need to reread it to know for sure how I'd feel between the two of them. But I just remember more passionate feelings about the 13th Tale than I have about this. This was a little bit slow. The characters were very lovable, but I felt like I mentioned in a previous clip that this book just has so many perspectives and kind of little stories going on that it was hard to feel like all of them were equally developed. I just feel like there was a story or two that I felt like I needed a little bit more from. Not a lot though. I feel like she still tied up all of the stories and developed them in a way that was still satisfying. There were just certain parts and portions that I wanted a little bit more from. That being said, I originally gave this 4 stars on Goodreads and 3.75 on Storygraph, but then I started thinking about the last 2 books I finished, which was Never Let Me Go and The Mitford Affair. Both of these I gave 4 stars solidly on Goodreads. Actually, Never Let Me Go I gave 5 stars on Goodreads. Mitford Affair I gave 4 stars on both, and then I gave 4.75 for this for Never Let Me Go on Storygraph, so just below a 5-star. But on further reflection, I think between the 3 of these, this is the one that's going to be most thought-provoking to me and have the most staying power. Even though I really enjoyed this and I think it's a powerful book, I think it's just quiet enough that it's not gonna stay with me as much. Like, I already feel myself not forgetting what happened, but just like not really thinking about it very much. The Mitford Affair, I feel like actually has a little bit more staying power. I don't think it is as beautifully written as Never Let Me Go, but I do feel like there was a little bit more plot and thought-provoking elements for me personally that I think it will stay with me a little bit better, but I do think this one's better written. However, adding in Once Upon a River into the mix, I feel like this has the beautiful writing and the staying power, and so I ultimately just gave all 3 of them 4 stars on both Goodreads and Storygraph, because I think they all had their various strengths, but I think when I rank them, I'll probably put Once Upon a River on top because it has kind of both elements a little bit more strongly. It was just a bit slow going. So anyway, those are my thoughts on Once Upon a River. Glad I finally read it. I've had it for years and years and just really desperately needed to get around to it. And I think that's going to be a wrap on this vlog. So thank you so much for watching. Let me know down below your thoughts on some of the books I purchased, as well as the books I've read. Did you like them? Have you read them before? Are you interested in them? Let me know any of your thoughts on my experiences on this vacation. I think I probably will end up having split this vlog into 2 parts. Again, I'll see when I start editing, but I have a feeling there's gonna be a lot that I'm going to have to go through. It's gonna take a while. So anyway, that doesn't matter to you because by the time you're seeing this, I obviously will have edited it and put it up. So thank you so much for going along with me. This was a wonderful experience for me, and I am excited to see you in my next vlog. I hope you are having a wonderful reading week, and I will see you next time. Bye!